Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Victory Road World Cup Open Top Cut. My name is Maeve O'Rourke. I am here with Yuki Zeninovic for the first time of hopefully many this summer. Yuki, how are you feeling?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Maeve. It's an incredible opportunity to be commentating here for Victory Road and for the World Cup Open. Nonetheless, such an exciting tournament with a lot of prizes on the line and a lot of preparation for both the World Cup and the World Championships happening next month.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has been definitely a really interesting turnout for this event as well. Really nice to be able to see kind of a glimpse, hopefully, of what we'll be able to see coming up in the next several weeks. A lot of very strong players that competed this weekend and a really tough top cut as well. So it'll be really interesting, I think, as we kind of move forward throughout the day and get to see what teams these players are bringing, because now they're in the nitty gritty, like you said, especially for World Championships as that comes up in the middle of August. So seeing what these trainers are trying to practice with, trying to bring for that format, and seeing what works for them as they have a few weeks of prep time.
Definitely, yeah. But typically in the VGC scene, the transition between the North American Championships and Worlds, there's a bit of a gap, but now we have the Victory Road hosting a lot of these tournaments and the World Cup, so we have a lot of content to be excited to see.
Well, actually, speaking of content, we are going to have to actually move fairly quickly into our first match. We'll be showing Joseph Ugarte and Yuta Takahashi actually for our first match of the day. They're currently in team preview. A couple of really interesting teams. I know Joe has been working with a couple of teams that he's been able to kind of show off, especially with his good finish at the North American International Championships just last weekend. But one thing that's really interesting for this is the only United States player in this top cut versus really what is a horde of Japanese players.
Definitely, yeah. It's quite interesting to see the amount of Japanese players here, given the time zone. It's starting around 10 p.m. In Japan time, this tournament. So a lot of excited Japanese players, and we also have players from China, Australia as well. So a lot of people excited to play Pokemon, which is great.
Like you said, late Sunday night for them.
Definitely. And yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about the players here. Joe UX9, obviously a very established player who has seen success from even a few years ago and has been playing a lot of Groudon teams, and now he seems to be going into the territory of Kyogre, which is a very interesting transition. It'll be interesting to see if he pivots over that for the World Championships. Over on Yuta's side, we see a more common combination as well of Zacian and Calyrex Shadow, so let's see what happens.
Yeah, Zacian here for Yuta is going to be the lead along here with Thundurus, while Joe brings out his own Zacian and the Grimmsnarl on his side. So kind of the dueling restricted leads here, but two very different setup mons.
Definitely. We have an interesting first turn here where we see the common pattern of Grimmsnarl facing off against a Zacian, where a Zacian, even potentially behind an Intimidate or a Reflect Up, can still knock out the Grimmsnarl in one hit. So it'll be interesting to see if Joe will switch out the Grimmsnarl to avoid this, or to get a crucial Thunder Wave in, so that even if the max airstreams come out from Thundurus, the Zacian on Joe's side will be able to be faster.
Yeah, and the Thundurus, like you said, can go for something like those max airstreams, can be a setup Pokemon early on, possibly trying to bait out some sort of Intimidate if it really is looking for it, but instead it's going to be switching out here and going to be bringing out for Yuta the Indeedee. So Indeedee going to be setting up some Psychic Terrain, which is huge, especially against Prankster from this Grimmsnarl, blocking those priority moves and protecting that partner Pokemon Zacian. Now, not going to be able to take a Thunder Wave, which is huge because it can go for this Behemoth Blade. Joe's can go for his Behemoth Blade first, just based on these speeds here, into the Indeedee. So a nice target, brings it down to its Focus Sash. So now Indeedee's going to be hanging on. Actually, no Focus Sash there, it just lives that hit. While the Zacian on Yuta's side goes for the Behemoth Blade of its own into the Zacian on Joe's side, does well over 75% of the damage.
Yeah, very great play on Yuta's end, predicting Joe to go for a more offensive move with Grimmsnarl rather than like a Reflect or a Light Screen, and be able to stop out with the Psychic Terrain, which blocks all priority moves that happen on the opposing side of the field. So basically what only ended up happening was the Zacians attacking either side of the field, but now the Grimmsnarl, if it doesn't have the the reflect or the light screen will have a little bit not as much utility here. So it'll be interesting to see if the Grimmsnarl indeed does have the reflect and light screen, or if it'll just be forced to switch out.
Yeah, Zacian for Joe is switching out after taking such a massive hit from Yuta's side. Going to be bringing out the Landorus here, a Pokemon that has been seeing a lot more activity, I feel like, in the past few months, especially at NAIC. Gets a really important Intimidate down here onto the Zacian on Yuta's side, but a Follow Me from this Indeedee is going to be redirecting whatever this Grimmsnarl may possibly be going for, but the Reflect is not going to be any issue with that Follow Me. Just going to be trying to boost the defense on the side for Joe as this Behemoth Blade comes out. Behemoth Blade, even though it is going to be mitigated now by this Intimidate and by this Reflect, is still going to do a pretty massive chunk of damage, a full one-hit knockout onto this Grimmsnarl here. So Grimmsnarl now off of the field, not able to produce any sort of utility like it normally is.
Definitely, yeah, this was a big turn for Yuta. Even though Intimidate was on Zacian and the Reflect was up, the Zacian was still able to get the knockout on Grimmsnarl, which is a little bit uncommon. Usually Grimmsnarls are trained to survive a Behemoth Blade from a Zacian with both Intimidate and Reflect. So perhaps a very Zacian invested in a lot of attack, or perhaps a Grimmsnarl with not that much defense. But now the Regieleki is coming in and could spend some Electro Webs to control the speeds, and Landorus could also do a lot of max airstreaming. So we can see a lot of speed control happen on Joe's end. So yeah, we have Yuta with the advantage in terms of Pokemon count, but we might see a bit more momentum from Joe here.
Yeah, Zacian switches out and going to be bringing in the Thunderous here once again for Yuta. The Indeedee, though, still hanging on. It could still go for something like a Follow Me with that 1 HP. Joe is going to be going for a Dynamax here. I think either Pokemon is a really good option. You know, Landorus can be so strong, and that is going to be the Dynamax option here. But we have seen a lot of Dynamax Regieleki in this format, so I think it definitely was a tough choice for Yuta. Not wanting to take an attack from either one of these Pokemon, but a Max Quake would be huge if Yuta was able to call it and switch in his Thunderous here. But a Protect from the Indeedee going to stop any of that damage except from this Electro Web. We'll be able to go into the Thunderous here. Not going to be doing, you know, super effective damage thanks to that electric typing here. Sorry, forgive me. Still going to be able to get that Defiant boost, though, from that speed drop, which is going to be huge for him going forward if Yuta wants to go for something like a Dynamax. But the Max Airstream is going to go into that slot as well. Not enough to get the knockout here, most importantly, but it does maybe mitigate what Yuta might have wanted to do for something like a Dynamax. May not be able to put out as much pressure.
Yeah, definitely. This is an absolutely massive turn for Joe. One of the big Dynamax candidates for Yuta's team is presumably that Thunderous, as we saw the Defiant activation. And now that it's basically 10% of its original HP, it'd be a lot harder to Dynamax it and get the full utility of the increase in HP. So now Yuta might be forced to Dynamax the Calyrex in the back instead, which is usually not as popular of a Dynamax pick. Usually something that kind of just cleans up in the back at the very end after some max airstreams happen from the Thunderous. So yeah, very interesting to see how this adaptation will happen.
Yeah, and that Thunderbolt is going to be able to knock out that Thunderous there. Not even worrying about that Defiant boost, able to get so much damage off on that one swap in turn that it had. The Max Airstream will go into the Indeedee here, also picking up that pretty easy knockout, and once again boosting the speed for both of these Pokemon. Regieleki is a Pokemon that loves an extra speed boost, but I think 2 speed boosts sometimes feels like overkill.
Definitely, yes. And yeah, like you said, a bit overkill with the amount of max airstream boosts that are happening with Yuta not having a tailwind option. It seems like there's no way for him to catch up to the speed here. And yeah, I think we might see Joe close out this game very soon, barring any kind of critical hits.
Yeah, I think Yuta has to really just stall out this last turn of that Dynamax. Most likely going to be something maybe like a Protect that we could see here, just to deal with a Max Quake, any sort of, you know, maybe to boost that they're trying to get to help deal with that Calyrex. You do have the power of those double targeting moves. You know, as long as if this Regieleki is able to go for something like a Protect as well, maybe just to stall out, but you don't always see them running it, especially, you know, if they are, you know, possibly something just trying to get as much damage off. Even you could switch out here, I think, but Regieleki is a Pokemon that is incredibly powerful, and it is facing down 2 Pokemon that do not want to see it, because you've gotten rid of, I think, anything that would have been the bigger threats for the Regieleki, and now you're going faster than every Pokemon on the field.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, Maeve, I think Yuta definitely has a chance here if he can stall out this one last turn of Dynamax over from Joe's end. Landorus, not a Pokemon able to use ground type moves that effectively outside of its max, since it involves hitting your own partners, and Regieleki certainly won't appreciate Earthquake. So yeah, we'll see what happens this turn.
Yeah, the Electro Web here going into the protected Zacian slot, a pretty common protect, I would believe, so you're not taking something like a Max Quake at full strength. Does a pretty decent chunk to the Calyrex, most importantly if there is a Focus Sash on that slot, because we did not see one on the Indeedee, it just lived on what I assume is a Ghost Focus Sash. Then it's going to be able to help pick up that knockout next turn. Max Quake does a good chunk of damage even through that protect to that Zacian, so I think Joe still putting himself in a very dominant position to kind of move forward here, especially things like the Electro Webs will start to pick up quickly. Astral Barrage, though, brings the Regieleki down to its Focus Sash, so that reveals the item on the Regieleki here. And finally, that Psychic Terrain does disappear as well. Not that it was doing all that much at this point after the Grimmsnarl was knocked out.
Yeah, definitely. And a very interesting interaction we saw in this last turn. We see that Calyrex did not protect or go for the max guard, potentially indicating it has a choice item since it does not have any kind of status move. And on the other hand, Joe going for the max Quake into Zacian to raise the special defense of his Pokemon, and also noticing that the Calyrex Shadow might go for the max guard and negate the max Quake altogether. But Zacian, a Pokemon not able to Dynamax, is a safe target for the max Quake. The effect of the special defense boost will happen no matter what, even if it does protect.
Yeah, and there is a protect from the Regieleki with that 1 HP left, just trying to stay on the field and prevent that Calyrex from getting a boost here. Zacian also goes for a protect on Yuta's side. Not going to be taking damage from this Earthquake, but it is going to be only going into this Calyrex thanks to the protect from the Regieleki on Joe's side. And if Joe can get rid of this Calyrex, that really does allow him, I think, to get a bit more comfortable in the endgame, but he is not able to get the knockout here, even with that Life Orb for the Landorus here, and instead this Astral Barrage going to be going into this Landorus, and this should be enough, I believe, to get the knockout, especially if it is, like you said, possibly a choice item like a Choice Specs.
Yeah, definitely. We saw the Landorus get the special defense boost and was at a comfortable amount of HP, and still went down to this Astral Barrage, so definitely might indicate a Choice Specs item potentially. And Yuta definitely getting lucky with the double protect there, since Zacian had already gone for that the previous turn. We'll see if that ends up still helping him out here. We have two Pokemon with very low HP on Joe's end, but are both currently faster thanks to the max Airstreams, and potentially with Electro Web coming in, so we'll see what happens.
Quick Attack is the move here for Zacian, getting that priority movement off onto the 1 HP Regieleki, preventing something like an Electro Web from going in and knocking out possibly that Calyrex and slowing them down. Joe here, though, is going to be able to go with that Zacian into the Calyrex slot because he's shown to be faster, especially in the turn, what feels like a very long time ago, but I believe turn 1 or turn 2. But this still means, you know, that this Zacian on Yuta's side is going to be slower, I think, than Joe, so Joe really needs to get this knockout here.
Yes, this was a crazy turn of events. Now we're just down to the difference in speed tiers of the Zacians. And the quick attack,
close.
Yes, fails to get the knockout. And yes, we'll see if this one will be enough.
Yeah, this Behemoth Blade I think is going to be pretty crucial here. It is enough to get the knockout, thankfully, so I believe that, you know, that Intimidate drop from that Landorus earlier on in the game was really important for that quick attack, especially because the Reflect had just come down as well. So a really nice game one from Joe. They definitely brought it down to the wire, though, so it's really interesting to kind of see how those interactions work. Quick Attack Zacian is not a Pokemon that you really see ever, but that priority is incredibly helpful to have as you're kind of moving forward through those endgame scenarios, especially, I think, you know, now Joe has to be cognizant of the fact that it's there for those next several games, especially if his own Regieleki gets brought down to Focus Sash once again.
Definitely, yeah, and we see that Yuta might not actually be super confident in the how much speed he's trained with his Zacian. We see that in the very last turn he went for the quick attack, even though Zacian had you know, still in the red, but maybe about 15% of its health left, and you know, quick attack not a super effective move on Zacians. So you know, if he had gone for the Behemoth Blade instead, and was able to go first, then you know, might have been able to get the knockout first instead of Joe coming back with the Behemoth Blade. So it's possible that Yuta has a Zacian that has a little bit more HP and a little bit less in the speed. So yeah, will be interesting to see how the adaptations might happen in this game. Maeve, do you have any thoughts on how the players might lead differently.
I think the main thing is that if Yuta is bringing that Thunderous, it needs to do the work that he was prepping for it to bring, because it really just swapped in on a turn, took too much damage, and then wasn't able to kind of capitalize on any sort of switch in. I think if you bring in that Thunderous again, you have to protect it. Indeedee is kind of a nice option to have, especially to draw, away from your opponents themselves. But it also, I think, only really got one solid turn of Follow Me, and its main thing was to stop that Grimmsnarl, which, you were able to take out fairly easily, because we saw, even with a Reflect and an Intimidate, that Zacian was able to knock out that Grimmsnarl in one hit anyway. So I think you have to feel pretty confident with how much damage output your Zacian can do. Both of these trainers, again, I think the Thunderous Max would be a really nice option. We didn't see a single Dynamax from Yuta in that game one, because his Dynamax option of that Thunderous got knocked out so early and was not able to kind of put on the pressure that I believe Yuta was hoping for. So we'll see what his changes are. It is actually going to be the Calyrex and the Indeedee on this turn one. So if you're looking for something, maybe instead of that Astral Barrage, you could use Expanding Force thanks to the Psychic terrain, and then you also block something from this Grimmsnarl like another Thunder Wave, and Zacian, has to maybe contend with another Follow Me that didn't knock out in game one.
Yes, we see Yuta make an adaptation here, bringing in the Calyrex Shadow instead of the Zacian, and Joe, maybe perhaps he predicted Joe to not bring the Grimmsnarl this time, since we saw Yuta lead with the Zacian in game one and knock out the Grimmsnarl in one hit, but Joe doesn't take the bait, and now the Grimmsnarl is in a great position to fend off the attacks from the Calyrex Shadow.
Yeah, that Follow Me coming out here first from that Indeedee after the Protect. And Astral Barrage, though, goes into the Protect for this Zacian. It is going to do damage into this Grimmsnarl here. This Grimmsnarl is showing that it did not go for a priority Prankster move, and it does not do a ton of damage onto the Grimmsnarl from that Astral Barrage. It goes for the Foul Play instead, targeting into the Indeedee. This is a good chunk of damage, and it is going to be important if you're trying to get that knockout on the Indeedee to allow yourself to gain those important attacks onto the Calyrex itself. So this Grimmsnarl only has a couple of options. It's only got, we saw the Reflect and we've seen the Foul Play. It cannot go for that Thunder Wave, so it makes it a little bit tougher.
Yeah, definitely. And we see Joe go for the Protect turn one, understanding that it can't knock out the Indeedee in one hit with this Behemoth Blade, so getting a little bit of that chip with Foul Play first, and hoping to potentially get a knockout this turn with this Behemoth Blade, and then land the Foul Play onto the Calyrex Shadow. We'll see if Yuta will be able to see this coming and adapt appropriately.
Ooh, I don't know though. Helping Hand. That Helping Hand here goes first. Going to boost the power of this Astral Barrage by an absolute ton. Going into both of these Pokemon here. Easy knockout on the Zacian. Zacian's not going to be able to get that knockout onto the Indeedee here. Grimmsnarl is still able to hang on because that move's not very effective, but now with the Grim Neigh boost and the option for Helping Hand, that cannot get knocked out this turn. I think Yuta has put himself in a far more commanding lead, but the Foul Play, because there was no Follow Me, plus the critical hit into that Calyrex, is an easy knockout, also revealing no Focus Sash on there just to kind of confirm.
Definitely a big turn, and it's a little bit hard to tell if the critical hit was something that mattered or not. Calyrex Shadow, not usually trained to have a high attack number, and in this case, it's actually probably trained to have a lower attack number with its nature. So Foul Play is a move that depends on the opposing Pokemon's attack. And yeah, even though it's 4 times effective, if the attack is low enough, perhaps it'll be able to survive this Foul Play. So yeah, we'll see how both players can come back from this now in a 3v3 position.
Yeah, and in this 3v3, you're looking finally at both methods of speed control for both of these teams. You're looking at the Electro Web from Joe, and you're looking also at a Max Airstream from Yuta's side. This Thunderous now is in a way better position than it was in game one, able to come in for free off of the knockout on that Calyrex. Could go for a Dynamax here for Yuta, and unless this is the Indeedee, and I've made a lot of incorrect calls on Dynamaxes in some weird circumstances before. However, it should in fact be this Thunderous, able to kind of bring out some really powerful moves. If it takes something like an Electro Web, you're also giving it a Defiant boost, and now you don't even want to bring in your own Landorus if you brought brought it once again to get another Intimidate off onto these Pokemon. Electro Web, though, immediately going to be giving, ooh, actually an Avoid here, most importantly. And the Avoid on the Pokemon you almost want to avoid, so it goes into the Indeedee instead, but it does not go into that Thundurus. You are not getting that Defiant boost. This Max Airstream into the Grimmsnarl will get the knockout, and it will boost the speed of both the Pokemon on Utah's side. With a critical hit to boot, not really all that much that matter because you were under 25% on the Grimmsnarl anyway.
Yes, definitely, and it's quite hard to tell if Joe benefited or not from this the miss on the Electro Web. Yes, the speed drop is important, but the Thundurus will also get the Defiant boost, which will also happen with Landorus potentially switching in here. So yes, even with the Electro Web from the following turn, the Thundurus would still be faster since it had the Airstream from the previous turn uninterrupted. So yeah, not in a great position for Joe. With the attack boost from Thundurus, we'll see if he'll be able to knock out the Landorus here.
Yeah, Regieleki as well, you know, thanks to that Mystical Fire from the Indeedee, its Focus Sash that we saw revealed in Game 1 is now completely broken. Any attack from Utah, if they're going for something into that Regieleki slot, could be easily enough to knock out. Regieleki, much like Calyrex, is a lot more of a glass cannon kind of Pokemon than, you know, some of the others that we've seen. Indeedee can be pretty tanky, especially, you know, after dealing some big hits here, but, you know, Regieleki's not in a super comfortable position. If this Landorus wants to go for the max and maybe go for a max Rockfall into this Thundurus, I think that could be pretty potentially useful, especially just trying to get some more residual chip damage every single turn thanks to that Sandstorm here. Joe, though, finally getting his Dynamax out. Both trainers going for a kind of later game Dynamax. This Landorus is going to be able to hopefully put on some pressure, maybe match a Max Airstream for Max Airstream, if that is kind of the move that Joe is going by using Fly. But instead here, Regieleki goes for the Protect, trying to not get knocked out here from either of these Pokemon on Utah's side. But still, the Follow Me from the Indeedee is going to be directing any attack possibly that Joe had, especially something like a Max Rockfall that could do some super effective damage. Another Max Airstream, though, goes into the Regieleki slot from Utah's side. Once again, just keeping that speed boost up, just making sure that Utah is one step ahead with his own Thundurus thanks to that miss on the Electro Web. And just continuing to boost those stats. Even with that Defiant boost, it still did a good chunk through Protect, but a Max Airstream to match from Joe into the Indeedee is enough to knock it out and get rid of those Follow Me's.
Yes, excellent turn from Joe, even though he was a little bit behind in the Pokemon count, and with the unfortunate Electro Web miss earlier. With the Crucial Protect on Regieleki, was able to boost the speed stat on his Regieleki with the Max Airstream from Landorus, while also being able to knock out the opposing Indeedee. And with Regieleki's naturally very high speed stat, might be able to be faster than the Thundurus now, with just one boost in the speed stat. So we'll see if yeah, it's trained that way, and if so, this might be an opportunity for the Regieleki to go for an Electro Web, bring down the speed, and allow for Landorus to get a Max Quake.
Yeah, Zacian, though, even though it's coming in here at full health, does not want to be taking a full strength max move. Thunderbolt, though, showing that this Regieleki is faster thanks to just one speed boost, will be taking a little bit of damage onto the Thundurus, who then very cleanly knocks it out with another Max Airstream. So now Joe is down to his last Pokemon, but it's a Pokemon that I don't think you're too upset about facing down these two here from Utah. You are, you know, it is a little bit tougher, but you could possibly go for something like this Max Rockfall here just to do a chunk of damage onto this Thundurus. If it's enough to knock out, which I believe it was, it's a little bit tough to tell, that should be absolutely massive here. Getting that Sandstorm up as well. If it didn't knock out, I believe the Sandstorm should. I believe it got it incredibly close. Yeah, there we go. So that Sandstorm there, enough to knock out that Thundurus, getting you down into a position where you're in front of a Zacian here, and I believe you still have one more max move, and already you dealt with a Protect on this turn.
Yes, definitely. Joe correctly predicting that the Zacian would Protect, so not going to attack it at all with the Regieleki or the Landorus, but now it seems the Zacian might be faster than the Landorus, so we'll see if a potential Behemoth Blade coming out from Utah's end will be able to pick up this Landorus if it's faster, which it is. So yeah, let's see how these Pokemon are trained.
Yeah, this is a very, very scary end game here for Joe, and that is enough for the knockout, right? So that was a very strong opening of the game for Utah. Joe was able to really bring it back there, but all of those Airstreams that compounded towards the end of that game just made it so that Yuta put himself in the position to win because he had that speed advantage. It would have been a pretty, I believe, clean, if not a knockout, incredibly close on that Zacian with the Max Quake, so it is a little bit tougher to tell, but that Behemoth Blade, because it does that additional damage onto a Dynamax Pokemon, was able to get that knockout onto Landorus, who doesn't want to take a Behemoth Blade on a normal non-Dynamax day, but on a Dynamax day especially, it is not where it wants to be.
No, certainly not. Behemoth Blade, a very strong attack that can do basically its normal amount of damage output to a Dynamax Pokemon who has doubled its HP. And yeah, I think Joe very clever to notice that the Zacian will probably protect on the second to the last turn there, and going for the Rockfall into the Thundurus. I think a potential adaptation he might be able to go for in a similar situation is go for a Max Airstream into the Thundurus and be able to match the speed boost on Zacian in the following turn, so that it might have gone for a Max Quake in that last turn before the Behemoth Blade could go off. Thundurus, a Pokemon that doesn't have that much opportunities to get damage out outside of Max, so potentially less of a target in the future turns.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important to make sure of now is now you kind of have a better idea of the items in this game 3. So now that I believe that we confirmed that Calyrex is not Focus Sash, you only need one solid hit. And you really only possibly need it to be something like that Foul Play from the Grimmsnarl like we saw possibly earlier in the tournament. If you do go again for that Indeedee Calyrex lead, which I think is a really strong and very offensive heavy lead for Yuta to go with, and you know, a little bit more aggressive than his lead in game 1. And then even if you do lose your Calyrex, even after a Grimnay boost, you do get your Thundurus in for free, which I think is a really good point for Yuta to kind of pay attention to, is because in his game 1, when he wasn't able to get his Thundurus Dynamax, that put him in a really tough endgame position that he wasn't able to come back from. But he is, you know, he was cognizant of the fact that if he could get rid of some pretty problem, like, pesky Pokemon, that he could allow his Thundurus to come in for free and take kind of a trade of his own and give him, I think, a better shot moving forward. Continue to get that speed boost. When you're facing a team as fast as Joe's can get, then it's something that you kind of need to pay attention to, especially if Joe is only bringing one restricted to each of these matches. Instead, though, Zacian and Thundurus for the lead for Yuta, and then Joe himself will be matching with Zacian and Regieleki.
Yes, we see both players adapt very drastically on both ends. So on Yuta's end, not bringing the Calyrex Shadow at all in the beginning lead, and over on Joe's side, the Grimmsnarl, the trusty partner that could fend off the Calyrex attacks and retaliate with a Foul Play for the one-hit knockout, is also not present. So perhaps was able to predict the Zacian coming in with a potential Electro Web and a Behemoth Blade, being able to knock out one of these, either of these Pokemon. So a very good position for Joe, having the Regieleki with speed control that can happen before the Thundurus.
Yeah, and the option here too is you're facing with two Zacian and two Pokemon that have really good speed control options, but Regieleki's is only in out of its Dynamax, because I don't believe that we've seen Bounce be revealed or any sort of Max Airstream from this Regieleki. I could be mistaken, but I'm about 90% sure, because this Regieleki is it's able to do a ton of damage, but if it's not able to go first, then you put yourself in a tougher spot. But this Thundurus here is going to be the max for Yuta, which I believe means that Joseph did not go for his own Dynamax here, since that Thundurus is the first Pokemon to kind of show it. Maybe you look for something like a Protect from this Zacian, if that is just trying to mitigate some damage from a Max Airstream. But you see a different Protect from the Zacian on Yuta's side, also trying to not deal with that much damage. Regieleki actually going for Screech here.
Wow.
A really nice move, really interesting tech to drop the defense. Does get the Defiant boost, but you're setting up for your own Zacian to get a very powerful Behemoth Blade off here. Going to be able to do a ton of damage thanks to that drop in the special defense, and also thanks to it being a Dynamax. And if you're able to get rid of this Thundurus right out of the gate, which you are, then you put yourself in a great endgame position where you are not worried about dealing with a Dynamax from Yuta. An awesome tech from Joe.
Yes, and I mean, absolutely a phenomenal turn from Joe here. Correctly predicting the opponent to protect the Zacian, a potential pattern of relying on the extra bulk that comes with Dynamaxing, be able to protect your partner, get the Airstream boost, and then retaliate the following turn once you have the extra speed, not being affected by Electro Web. But Joe seeing through that and targeting down the Thundurus, taking it out before it can even do a single Max Airstream. So now Yuta's out of a Dynamax, and Joe still has both Pokemon at full health, so yeah, excellent turn from Joe.
Talk about, you know, hidden information that you save till game 3. You know, it's also tough when you put that kind of info on stream if your opponents haven't been watching but maybe tune in for this. But really hiding that Screech, because, you know, Regieleki oftentimes run Bounce to get a max Airstream, possibly if they go for a Dynamax. But you're seeing here that Joe is kind of prioritizing this Regieleki to not be as much of a Dynamax Pokemon, I believe, on this team. Electroweb here, another miss here from Joe, absolutely huge. Not getting the speed drop onto the Indeedee, thankfully. So, you know, it's not as bad as that Zacian. Now that Zacian is definitely going to be slower. But the substitute from Joe means that this means that his Zacian can possibly get deal with a little bit extra attacks here, while the Behemoth Blade from Utah is going to go into the Regieleki on Joe's side. We already know that it is holding the Focus Sash, but it still didn't even matter. It got it only down to 6 HP. Mystical Fire, though, from this Indeedee into the Regieleki, an easy pickup for the knockout.
Yes, another unfortunate Electroweb miss by Joe. Not really loved by that move today. And the speed drop might not be so critical for the Indeedee, but more of the damage, as we saw in game 1 or potentially game 2, as you very eloquently said, the invisible Focus Sash occurred. So with that little bit of chip from Electroweb, perhaps a Behemoth Blade would be able to take it out, but now not something that Joe can rely on, and instead probably has to have 2 hits going into that Indeedee. So very unfortunate. But Landorus coming in now, potential to Dynamax against these two, and Intimidate drop on Zacian, which is very helpful. On the other hand, the Indeedee could go for the Helping Hand and the Behemoth Blade onto the Landorus. So yeah, we'll see if Joe predicts correctly.
Yeah, thankfully for that speed drop right on that Zacian, that your Landorus should be able to go first. Follow Me, though, is going to be the move of choice, while the Protect through the substitute. So you can assume possibly an Earthquake here, which is what happens with this Landorus, going into your own Protect, so you're not taking any damage from it. But most importantly, going to be doing super effective damage onto the Zacian. It is enough for the knockout. Indeed, he gets brought down to just over half of its HP. But now you've removed 2 of the biggest threats on Utah's team, being the Thundurus and being the Zacian here. So Utah is is in a really tough end game. You know, if you're trying to get some tough moves out here, something like those Astral Barrages, you're still having to fend with a substitute that can also still take another Earthquake.
Yes, very good play from Joe again here. Noticing that the single target attacks would go into Indeedee, and also noticing that the Zacian had a speed drop from Electroweb previous turn, can see that he can use the Earthquake before the Zacian can move. So pretty safe play from Joe. And yeah, was able to get that Zacian basically for free as Utah follows me that turn. Now we see a Calyrex come in, which we know is faster than both of these Pokemon, especially with no Electroweb in. So a Helping Hand, Astral Barrage could come out here, but luckily Zacian's behind a substitute. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Protect from that Landorus here, but a Follow Me instead of a Helping Hand. Possibly just trying to use a regular Astral Barrage to knock out this substitute here on Joseph's side, just so that you can get that extra powerful Helping Hand Astral Barrage going on for the next turn, and maybe pick up those knockouts that you're really looking for. You know, breaking your substitute here is important, but not going for a Protect by Joe is also important, because he could go for that on the next turn if he was choosing to do so. Behemoth Blade, though, going into the Indeedee on Utah's side, thanks to that Follow Me, is enough for the knockout, so you're not dealing with any more Follow Me's on that next turn, which could be huge if you also go for your own Dynamax, just so you can outlive another Astral Barrage.
Yes, big deciding turn where if the Indeedee was able to hang on somehow, then it may be able to absorb a Behemoth Blade the next turn or a Max Airstream. But with Utah losing his redirection option here, now it's a 3v1 situation against the Calyrex, not able to Dynamax to increase its bulk. And yeah, now it's Joe's turn to fire back with his own Dynamax, get potential Max Airstream in, and still survive the really powerful Astral Barrage attacks coming out from Utah's end, thanks to the doubling HP.
Yeah, absolutely. And because there was no Protect on that last turn, you can comfortably Protect, get something up like a Max Airstream, and then just move forward in the game, getting that easy kind of set of knockouts. Astral Barrage, though, does a ton of damage. It is not a fun move to use, but instead of Protect, you're getting your own Behemoth Blade off here. Knowing that both of your Pokemon can possibly handle with the bulk, thanks to no Grenade boost, Behemoth Blade is enough to knock it out, and that gives Joe the win here. from this an incredibly interesting game 3 with some hidden techs that we hadn't seen previously, especially that Screech Regieleki, which I think is so much fun to have. Kind of gives me the reminder almost of that Prankster Whimsicott when they go for something like Charm or Fake Tears. But because Regieleki's not Prankster, you might not have to worry about something like that Psychic Terrain that is, you know, really tough to deal with when you're looking at something like an Indeedee on the opposite side. So thanks to Regieleki's speed and its really interesting move pool, I think it really gave Joe the advantage in that game.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, I want to point out something you mentioned earlier, which is, you know, Joe's real aptitude for hiding information in the best of 3. You can really see he's sort of like a connoisseur for the best of 3 format where, you know, he brought Regieleki both game 1 and game 2, used it pretty effectively, but didn't show all of its moves, showed Thunderbolt, showed Protect, showed Electroweb, but Regieleki not very standard in its 4th move, so, you know, it could have been Volt Switch, it could have been Eerie Impulse, but it was actually Screech, which was perfect in that scenario in game 3 on that first turn. Be able to take out that Thunderous in just 1 hit, you know, truly skilled in the best of 3 format. On the other hand, you know, I don't want to discount Yuta's ability to adapt as well. Game 1, we saw that his Thunderous went down and basically 1 hit went down into the red, and 1 attack from a max move from Landorus. Game 2 adapted to, you know, take a little bit a more careful approach on Thunderous, knowing that this is basically his only Dynamax option, and is able to, you know, come back in the game 2 to tie it up. So yeah, both players really great at adaptation.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important to see too, as we kind of move forward throughout this tournament, you know, it's an incredibly tough top bracket. And we'll be able to kind of show you the players. We didn't have enough time right when we started, but as we can kind of look at the players that have qualified, Joe is the only United States player, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe, Japanese players. So Yuta, who was the first seed from all of this, you know, showing, like you said, it is pretty late for you guys. It is not a comfortable hour for me like it is at 10:45 in the morning. So these guys are absolutely, you know, they're absolutely jacked to play Pokemon. They're very excited to do so. But there's a lot of really interesting teams. There's a lot of Italian players today. You know, Yuri is a player that's been around. Davide is another player who we've seen, you know, a million times just because they're so consistent and so talented at the game. But it shows a lot, I think, for World Cup kind of moving in, how strong these teams are, especially, you know, especially Japan. I think Japan was pretty gutted after their last year results. So definitely kind of showing up a lot stronger this time.
Yes, definitely. And I think, you know, the top cut we can see here is perfectly emblematic of the tradition of World Cup, where we have different players from different countries coming together to compete all in the same competition of Pokemon VGC. You know, I mean, I can't count by hand because I just see so many different flags. I mean, there must be at least 10, maybe even 15 different countries represented here. So really exciting to see this, you know, this really skilled players from all these different countries coming together to compete for the #1 spot in the World Cup Open. We'll have to see, you know, who made it through the top 16, other than Joe into the top 8, what kind of countries are represented there. But yes, you can definitely see a strong showing from Japan, despite the disadvantageous time zone. So very passionate group indeed.
Yeah, like I said, from last year, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about this because we didn't even get to bring this up. After the World Cup Open, Yuki and I will be doing the draft for the World Cup qualifier stage. The group stage. So we'll be able to bring you guys that draft. We'll be pulling the names, who's going in what group. So, you know, once we wrap up here, and I believe that'll be, oh, I'm so sorry. Yuki, you remember the time. Was it 11? No, it wasn't 11 UTC. You remember the time,
yeah,
right?
I believe, yeah, we'll be starting at 6 p.m. UTC, which I believe will be in something like a little bit under 3 hours from now. Yeah, just about 3 hours from now. So yeah, please feel free to, you know, keep following along the top cut for the World Cup Open and just stay right along on the ride for the group stage drafting that Maeve and I will be taking care of. Very exciting. We saw a lot of you know, interesting groupings last year, and now the fate is in our hands to decide that. So yeah, very excited to see how that will go.
Yeah, I think Japan is just happy to not have France in their group again, as France was automatically moved on. So again, we'll be able to bring that up. But I also wanted to say as well, thanks, because just that really quick start that we had, we are brought to you by GGtoor today. A huge shout out to GGtoor. They will also be helping us with the World Cup. So, you know, huge thanks to them. But we will be taking a quick break, and then we will come back with another match for you guys. So please stay tuned and please stick around.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Victory Road World Cup Open. We are now in the top 8 stage of the top cuts. Maeve, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. That last match was super interesting, but I think our next match, Yuki, I think you and I are both very excited for it.
Yes.
Two very different players. We'll still be able to show some Japanese talent like we were in that last round, but we also have a newcomer. So if you want to kind of give a rundown of who we're going to be showing today.
Sure, yeah. So I think the first player we'll be watching is Kotsukide. He is a Japanese player, recently a senior, so I believe he actually participated in the senior division of the Japan Nationals last year and was a runner-up at the Japanese Nationals. But even more notable, he was the seniors world champion in 2019 using a Xerneas and Rayquaza team along with the Togedemaru, which had a very interesting scene using a eject button that wish we had time to go into right now. But yes, Ko is a very skilled player who has has won tournaments against other players who are in the Masters division. So it's a true treat to see him play. But his opponent will make it easier for him. His opponent is Nils Schlatter from Sweden. Seems to be a new player starting to play during the Sword and Shield era, and will be on Team Sweden. So it'll be potentially exciting to see an early preview of Sweden versus Japan, if we won't even be able to see that in the actual World Cup itself.
Yeah, and one thing about Nils that's really interesting is I believe we'll be able to, once we go into that team preview and show you, speaking of how you spoke about Togedemaru and some really interesting Pokemon choices, it does look to be a little bit more of an interesting team that we'll be able to show you guys. It is one that I have seen around a little bit before. I believe it was first popularized by Ben Grismer or Chef VGC. If it isn't, it looks just like a Chef team. So Chef, if it isn't you, I'm sorry for typecasting the way that you build Pokemon teams, but totally fine. Super interesting though for both these players. Again, Team Sweden did very well last year as well. During the World Cup, really interesting team to watch. A lot of really nice ways to get to see a lot of these European players, especially for me in the American circuit. I deal a lot more with players from the North American region, and then we do get some players that come from a couple of European countries, but it is nice to kind of see a lot of these players who are unfamiliar to me until we get to the larger European tournament level. So it'll be great. I think it's exciting to have these new names, especially to have them do so well. But once we get to kind of look into team preview and see what both these trainers are bringing, I think it's going to be really interesting, especially, both of these trainers. And I will say this right now, they both are running Zacian Kyogre, which I think, you and I, Yuki, we both knew how crazy Sun was for such a large format, a section of the format of Series 12. But now Kyogre has really come back. I think Kyogre and then Calyrex Shadow Rider really kind of made hard comebacks, and I wonder almost if we'll be moving back towards that slower, almost Trick Room setting for Worlds once we hit there in a month.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the movements in this format. I remember even just a couple months ago, right around the time of the European International Championships, everybody was preparing for what we called the Rinya Sun, a very standard core set of a team with a Groudon Zacian on it. Everyone's trying to understand how to beat that team, how do you use it the best. And then, it was pretty popular for a bit, but now we start to see a little bit more diversity in the different teams. And like you said, we see a lot of Zacian Kyogre teams. We even see Eric Rios, the person who is, won a regional champion and European championship title with the Rinya Sun, transition to Kyogre almost immediately afterwards. So we can see there's a huge appeal for the team. And yeah, if we're about to see a mirror match, it'll be quite the treat to watch.
Thankfully, we're only looking at a mirror match of restricteds because it is going to be a little bit more interesting. Players are currently just getting set up, so once they go into team preview, we will be able to bring you guys that. However, something that I also find very interesting with these trainers themselves and just how everything it goes, it's that format cycle, and I see it every single year. I've been following VGC for a while. The format starts fast, and then it goes to Trick Room, and then it goes fast again, and then it sometimes goes back to Trick Room. It just depends on the length of the format, but it's something that people will hard counter for Trick Room, and then the hard counter for Trick Room is to go faster. So you kind of get to move around a little bit more in terms of just seeing how these formats shape up. So we're back in that more hyper offensive stage where Trick Room can be a good counter. So we're still seeing the Palkia and the Calyrex Ice Rider around. Those are still incredibly good teams. But you know, we're starting to kind of get into that point where things a bit, you know, tend to go a bit more hyper offensive. And speaking of hyper offensive, we have Barraskewda on the team for Nils here. And, you know, instead for Ko is running the Zacian, the Thundurus, Incineroar, Kyogre, Rillaboom, Grimmsnarl, which are 6 super solid Pokemon, 6 Pokemon where if you throw them on a team, you'll know you'll be able to get some interesting results. But instead here for Nils, Kyogre, Barraskewda, Zacian, Shedinja, Indeedee, and Landorus. So a couple of really funky picks here.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can see the two polar opposite kind of players in the in VGC, where over on Ko's side we see a very standard looking kind of team. You know, I know he used this to top cut the recent Japan National Tournament. He's been using it, I believe, even from the qualifier international challenge stage. So some team he's very, very familiar with. But on the other hand, yeah, we see from Nils something that's a little bit more unique. Like you said, a Ben Grismer kind of team. It's possible that the sets are all very similar to what Ben used. And yeah, a little bit less predictable, especially with the Shedinja. The win condition for Nils is a little bit less transparent. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how these teams face off. Like you said, a mirror match in terms of the two restricteds, but I believe they might not have a single overlap in the other Pokemon. So yeah, let's see what the leads are here.
Yeah, and if that is that Barraskewda coming out, you know it is that Swift Swim Pokemon. There have been so many ways to capitalize on weather. Swift Swim is one that you see, you know, Ludicolo was a big one for a long time, way early on in the format. But now you're going to be seeing it, yeah, with Barraskewda here. And you have two Kyogres opposite each other, both for Nils and for Ko. However, the Thundurus is the other choice for Ko, and neither of the Pokemon on Nils' side are really looking to take a Max Lightning right now, I think.
Definitely, and yeah, I think the one point to pay attention to here is, like you said, the Barraskewda has the Swift Swim ability, doubling its speed in the rain, so definitely going to be faster than the Thundurus, unless it has the Prankster ability. So we'll be able to fire off a max airstream, even if it's not the same flying type. It still has access to that move. So since we also saw that the Kyogre is faster than the opposing Kyogre based on the Drizzle ability happening over on Nils' side first, we can say that Nils probably has the speed advantage here. So definitely interesting to see how Ko can potentially fend off the attacks and yeah, make an opening for himself.
Yeah, Barraskewda is going to be the Dynamax choice here. If it goes for that bounce and turns that into that max airstream, that could be a great way to kind of continue to boost your speed, even if you are going to be the fastest thing on the field, you know, for certain, and does give you that option. But Ko also going to match that Dynamax here, and I believe that is going to be that Thundurus in that event ball, if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me, it's that Kyogre. Wow. They're both shiny, so you have to, you know, you have to kind of look into it. So that shiny Kyogre is actually going to be the option here. If it goes for something like a Max Lightning by using Thunder, it's going to be able to do a ton of damage and also help keep its HP up if it goes for Water Spouts in the future. The Max Geyser, though, from the Barraskewda into the Thundurus is enough for a one-hit knockout here. So a ton of damage thanks to, you know, basing that off of that liquidation, and shows the Life Orb as the item, which helps make a bit more sense. Ice Beam, though, from the Kyogre into the Kyogre on Ko's side, and a Max Lightning in return into that Barraskewda slot. That Barraskewda also goes right down. So now the nice thing for Ko is Ko still has his Dynamax, but Nils lost his. But you think you get rid of the big threat in the Thundurus, but now you're still looking at more Max Lightning.
Yes, definitely a very offensive first turn that we might have been able to predict based off of the leads, but both players were able to retain their Kyogres, but the only difference being that Nils lost his Dynamax candidate, whereas over on Ko's end just lost a Thundurus that didn't Dynamax. I think that Ko made a pretty good prediction that Nils would target down the Thundurus, saying, okay, you know, if you're going to target down my Thundurus, then I'm not even going to Dynamax it. I'm just going to let you take it down in one hit, but in return, I'm going to KO the Pokemon that I think you are going to Dynamax. So I think Ko definitely making a great prediction here. Now he has a Kyogre with double the HP stat thanks to the Dynamax, and we have a Rillaboom coming in that obviously has a very, very good you know, matchup against the Kyogre with the priority Grassy Glide move.
Yeah, that Rillaboom puts a ton of pressure onto the Kyogre. The Zacian here, pretty comfortable as long as it's not taking something like a high horsepower, possibly, or even something like a superpower if that Rillaboom has a move like that. But Rillaboom does have that priority with that Grassy Glide into the Kyogre. It's a pretty comfortable spot to be in. But this Kyogre, we saw that it went for Ice Beam in its last turn. So if this Kyogre is choiced into something, then it can only use Ice Beam, which it's, you know, Rillaboom's a pretty comfortable target for an Ice Beam here, but you might have to think about switching out your Kyogre on your side to maybe allow it to reset its move pool a little bit, make some different choices. Ko, though, I think is pretty comfortable to go for another, you know, it could go for a Max Geyser here very comfortably. It has the Rain Boost, it could do a ton of damage onto that Zacian slot, and Rillaboom is pretty comfortable as well. Zacian, though, switches out, brings in Indeedee, going to be setting a very important Psychic Terrain here if there is a Grassy Glide on the field, getting rid of that Grassy Terrain entirely, which will be huge to possibly allow for this Kyogre to go first. Also, the Psychic Seed being shown here boosts the special defense of this Indeedee from possibly taking an attack. Kyogre goes for the Ice Beam thanks to no Grassy Terrain on the field into this Rillaboom. It is not enough for the knockout, but you see how fast that Kyogre went, so that does make me think it is choice locked into something here. While there is a Max Hailstorm onto the Indeedee from the Kyogre on Ko's side, does just over 50% or just under 50% of its HP.
Yeah, quite an interesting turn there. So at first you think that Ko might have a very safe Grassy Glide into the Kyogre and a Max Geyser into the Zacian. Both attacks that are capable of taking down the opponent, but we see the Kyogre surviving on 1 HP here, so you know, really great turn from Nils. Obviously a little bit behind in terms of the Pokemon he has left, but was able to bring in the Psychic Terrain, prevent the Grassy Glide from not only moving first, but also reducing its power, no longer having the Grassy Terrain up, and was able to get an Ice Beam off on the Rillaboom. Now he's able to get another Ice Beam off before the Grassy Glide can happen again. So definitely in a better spot for Nils, but obviously a little bit behind because Ko still has a Dynamax Kyogre, and Zacian, who might have the Behemoth Blade, is in the back. So now we see Protect from Rillaboom not wanting to take the very telegraphed Ice Beam.
Yeah, Protect on that Rillaboom I think is very important to pay attention to because it shows that it's not that Assault Vest Rillaboom variant. Max Lightning from Ko's Kyogre into the Kyogre on Nil's side is very easily going to pick up that knockout thanks to only having 1 HP left. This Indeedee, though, still going to be able to attack. It does not have the Psychic Terrain on the field anymore thanks to that Max Lightning. It now has the Electric Terrain. So if this Indeedee goes for Expanding Force here, which it does, it will only be a single target, but they did pick the correct target in that Kyogre instead of that protected Rillaboom slot. So Hail again doing a little bit more chip damage as we go, but this Rillaboom still hangs on. Indeedee now under half of its HP.
Yes, so yeah, quite an interesting turn. Now we have the Zacian come back in, able to do a lot of damage to the Kyogre, although perhaps the Dynamax will end this turn. So Zacian, a very fast Pokemon, able to move first than both of Ko's Pokemon at this point. And yes, the Rillaboom is not that effective of a Pokemon against the Zacian or the Indeedee, barring any kind of high horsepower like you mentioned. So definitely not Ko's game yet. Depends on what he still has in the back. But yeah, we'll see if the Indeedee will be protecting here or be using the Follow Me to take one of the attacks instead of the Zacian, which is definitely going to be Nil's win condition from now on.
Yeah, and you cannot change the terrain anymore if you're Nils, right? You're stuck with your last 2 Pokemon, 2 Protects coming out, one on the Kyogre on Ko's side and one on the Indeedee on Nil's side. Zacian goes for a Play Rough into that protected slot on that Kyogre, revealing that first move of choice. Grassy Glide, though, into the protected slot on the Indeedee. You don't have Grassy Terrain, but Ko is still really feeling going for those Grassy Glides. Even with the Electric Terrain up, you know, Rillaboom is not the fastest thing on the field, but now you've only got one more turn possibly before you're knocked out by that Hail. You know, you have to wonder if Zacian just ignores that Rillaboom and sees, you know, if Ko switches it out and then switches it back in to sack it for something just to get a terrain boost to help heal up your Kyogre.
Yeah, definitely an interesting turn where both players protected the Pokemon that was obviously going to be attacked, and yeah, just ending up in a stalemate situation. Now the Zacian has free reign to basically attack the Kyogre, and yeah, risk not getting knocked out in return thanks to the Rillaboom not having that much attacks to hit Zacian with. So we see a helping hand here, possibly indicating that Zacian will be attacking the Kyogre just to ensure the clean knockout.
Oh, but the protect here does fail for the double protect on the Kyogre. The Behemoth Blade, thanks to that helping hand, is going to be extra powerful going into this Kyogre slot. Should be enough, I believe, to get the knockout here, and it is. This does mean that this Rillaboom is kind of free to go for that Grassy Glide if it so chooses. However, it will get knocked out by the Hail this turn. So that Grassy Glide into the Indeedee slot is enough to pick up the knockout, but then Rillaboom will go down thanks to that Hail damage, and that, I believe, leaves us at a 1v1 with a pretty full health Zacian here for Nils.
Yeah, very interesting turn. Nils probably making a prediction that turn. So we saw that it had the play rough move, which has more damage output to the Kyogre, who resists the steel type attacks. It seems that potentially Nils predicted Ko to switch out to potentially his own Zacian to take the hit for the play rough, and did the helping hand to get that knockout. But we see that the last Pokemon was actually Incineroar instead. So a total mismatch in prediction of what the last Pokemon for Ko is. And now with the Intimidate and Zacian, we'll see if it has the firepower to be able to knock out the Incineroar with a fighting type attack.
Yeah, a comfortable protect here through that fake out. Hail does stop, so no more residual damage for both of these Pokemon here. The big thing though, if you are Zacian, you do not want to get Flare Blitzed. You just don't want to. This Incineroar is at full health. You've already been intimidated, kind of moving into this next set of turns, which already makes it a little bit tougher on you, even if it is your first attack drop of the game. Now you're at neutral. If this Zacian's able to get off some Sacred Swords, able to do some big damage, I think it's going to help. If the only move that this Incineroar can go for super effective damage is Flare Blitz, it is damaging itself, so that is something to pay attention to as well. The Sacred Sword does over half of its HP here, while the Flare Blitz from the Incineroar onto this Zacian has a bit of chip, and it's enough for the knockout here. So that means that Ko is going to take this game as well. A huge amount of damage, and it still hangs on even thanks to that recoil. So a really well-played endgame there by Ko.
Yes, like we talked about, I think Nils probably predicted that the Zacian would be the last Pokemon on Ko's end, and going for the Behemoth Blade ended up not mattering, being the Incineroar, and kind of catching him off guard, thinking that he might be able to win the 1v1 with the Zacian, but because of the Incineroar, who was able to get the Intimidate drop, able to survive the Sacred Sword and fire back with the Flare Blitz. I think one interesting thing that we can get out of this last turn is that either the Incineroar might have a little bit more of an attack investment, or that the Zacian might rely a bit more on its speed and attack stats, because Flare Blitz is usually a move that might not be able to knock out all Zacians. If they had a lot more HP investment, they might be able to survive one Flare Blitz. A little bit of an indication of how these Pokemon are trained, and interesting to see if Nils or Ko can use this to their advantage going into game 2.
Yeah, and it is a really interesting kind of point, right? Because then you wonder if Nils even brings the Barraskewda. It did nothing for him in game 1. It got the knockout onto that Thundurus, which is absolutely important to have, but that's not something that you can't do with other Pokemon on your team, right? Your Zacian can definitely handle it. Your Shedinja might be able to just bother it enough thanks to some ally switches. It doesn't want to take a max Airstream for sure, but it is able to kind of, it once again can be a bothersome Pokemon. You're looking at the Shedinja. I don't know if it has a great matchup, because then you're facing also something like an Ice Beam, or, if that if Rillaboom is running knockoff, then that can also be a problem. But instead, but even looking for Nils' team, I would almost rather see the Landorus come instead of Barraskewda.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to the point about ally switch, bring up the Shedinja, because I think Ko, a very skilled player who also, just like Nils, tried to predict the Zacian being on Ko's end at the very end. I believe Ko might have tried to predict that Nils might have a Landorus or even a Shedinja in the back, so we saw that he used a Max Hailstorm into a Zacian, a Pokemon that usually can take Max Hailstorm pretty well, usually something you want to use Max Geyser on instead. So we can see that Ko might have predicted Shedinja switching in for the partner slot of the Zacian, so that it can survive the attack from Rillaboom, the Grassy Glide. So a lot of predictions happening on both ends. It's interesting to see if Nils will be hesitant to bring the Shedinja in because of that move, and same with the Landorus. So yeah, interesting to see how the adaptations will happen.
Yeah, same leads here though from Ko with that Kyogre and that Thundurus, and the exact same lead here as well from Nils with the Barraskewda and with the Kyogre. So now you're in kind of a weird position, right? Do you predict that they're going to go for another Max Geyser and try and knock out, or a Max Lightning and try and knock out your Barraskewda? Do you go for a Max Guard? and just kind of helps waste and stall out one of their turns? Or do you, even with your own Kyogre, maybe go for your own max and try and get some kind of tougher damage off, with the Barraskewda itself and just go for your own max lightning? So I think it's a weird 50-50 for this turn.
Yes, I think we can try to understand some of the items that these Pokemon are using. So since we didn't see the Thunder's Protect in the first game, in a spot where Ko clearly predicted Nils to attack it, didn't protect means it might have the Assault Vest item. We saw that Kyogre had access to Protect, and a Kyogre that can Dynamax sometimes have the Assault Vest item, but probably doesn't. So yeah, we'll see how these two Dynamax with the Premier Ball. It's interesting. Oh, sorry, not the Premier Ball. What is that ball? I don't remember. But yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But yes. Anyways, we see the Kyogre Dynamax here, same as game one. We'll see if Nils takes the same bait as game one or makes a potential adaptation.
Yeah, actually the Max Darkness here is going to be the move of choice onto that Thunderous. It is not enough for the knockout like the Max Geyser was, but you are being able, you're able to drop the special defense. The Defiant boost actually reveals that it's not Prankster here, so it's another thing to kind of be wary of. The special defense boost, though, could really help if you go for something like a Water Spout, especially if this Kyogre is faster. But Kyogre instead goes for Thunder onto the Kyogre that is Dynamaxed on, onto the Thunderous that on Ko's side does get that knockout pretty cleanly. And if this Kyogre, we've seen that it goes pretty quick. It is still slower than the Barraskewda thanks to the Swift Swim, who is now taking a Max Lightning and once again getting knocked out. But Nils must be comfortable with that trade, right? Nils must be comfortable saying, I'm happier getting a special defense drop onto your Kyogre that's Dynamaxed than having all three of my Dynamax turns.
Yeah, definitely. Also same with the electric terrain, so that any Thunders coming out in the future will do a lot more damage. Possibly going to be overridden by a grassy terrain if a Rillaboom comes in. But perhaps he'll be going for a similar pattern as game one, where he swaps in the Indeedee so that he can take back the terrain and be able to damage the opponent. But this time he chose Thunder instead of the Ice Beam, so clearly going after the Kyogre. But yeah, quite interesting that he went for the Thunderous, potentially predicting the Ko to go for the Protect or the Max Guard on the Kyogre, seeing that maybe Nils will adapt and go for the Kyogre this time. But yeah, ended up being the 1-1 trade, kind of similar to the first game. And yeah, we'll see if Nils can come up with a different pattern and be able to squeeze it out. But we see an Incineroar come in instead of the Rillaboom, which is quite interesting. It seems that Ko has noticed that Nils Kyogre has a choice item, likely the choice Scarf, and can't use any water type attacks. So Incineroar, usually a Pokemon that's unfavorable to Kyogre, is actually in a great spot.
Yeah, and it has the opportunity for Fake Out against a Pokemon that can't protect from it if this Kyogre is using a choice item. However, Nils, we saw last game, had that Indeedee, which could stop the use of Fake Out going thanks to that priority, the ability to stop those priority attacks. Zacian here does have the opportunity to go for something like a Behemoth Blade into the Kyogre. It wasn't really able to do that in that last game because it came in later, but I think if you are the Kyogre on Nils' side, you have the opportunity here to switch in this Indeedee, block that Fake Out possibly, if that is what's coming through from Ko's side, and then even get the opportunity to go for some Follow Me's or some Helping Hands while both of these Pokemon are in a spot where they can only use single target moves. Because that Kyogre is Dynamax, and thanks to the special defense boost, it may be able to take it a little bit more comfortably. Wow. Fake Out not able to go thanks to that Psychic Terrain. Thunder from the Kyogre doesn't even get it down to about 50%, just a little bit closer to like 35 or 40, but the Max Lightning here from Ko onto the Kyogre on Nils' side is enough for a one-hit knockout, so an absolutely massive amount of damage.
Yes, so great turn for both players. Nils predicting the Fake Out to come in, so overriding the electric terrain that would have boosted the Thunder's damage in favor of blocking the Fake Out. But on the other hand, Ko firing back with a Max Thunder onto the Kyogre, noticing that it can't protect, so whatever is going to be in that slot will take a lot of damage from the Life Orb Max Thunder that was just dished out. So yeah, I think both players kind of saw what was going to happen, but I think Ko got the better end of the stick with a knockout versus the Kyogre just taking a little bit less than half HP, like you said, and not getting the paralysis that might have been able to bail Nils out here. So yeah, now Nils is back to his two Pokemon. Zacian is not intimidated right now, so you know, has a potential to be able to knock out the Kyogre or the Incineroar. But yeah, it seems that Indeedee is going to go for the Helping Hand to do extra damage to either of these Pokemon.
Yeah, the Sacred Sword here should do a ton of damage onto this Incineroar, but it is not enough to knock it out. It gets it so incredibly close. Is that holding a Focus Sash? A Focus Sash Incineroar is very interesting here. Might be why I was so comfortable in front of a Kyogre, as the Max Geyser from the Kyogre on Ko's side is enough to do a full knockout onto Nils's Zacian, just thanks to that Life Orb continuously just boosting the power of these Pokemon. You have Parting Shot now going into the Indeedee. This Incineroar going to be able to swap out, come back in, but I think that is a pretty comfortable game here. I think Nils is not going to be able to get enough damage off with a single target Expanding Force for 3 of Ko's remaining Pokemon.
Yeah, I think pretty safe statement for you to make there. Indeed, not a Pokemon that is known to dish out too much damage, especially the female form that Nils is using here. And yeah, we see that Rillaboom is here for the last Pokemon on Ko's end. Despite it looking like you know, Ko had a pretty commanding victory here, I want to shout out that, you know, it's possible that you know, it was just a difference in a potential 50-50. You know, knows with the Zacian, especially with access to the Helping Hand there, you know, could have used that against the Ko's Kyogre. Holding the Life Orb, it doesn't have probably that much HP investment, so you know, a Helping Hand Behemoth Blade might have been enough to knock out the Kyogre, and then in that case, you know, it would have been a 2v2 of the Indeedee and the Zacian versus the Rillaboom and Incineroar. And yes, the Intimidate would have come back in, but in that case, we'd still have the Rain up, so the